Episode number 1 for the Interface podcast. I'm here with Chris Howson. Chris, you've been part of the NDT industry for a long, long time, but take us back to where you began.
Yeah, so I came over here to Australia in about 2012, but prior to that I was doing NDT for one of the big 4 power companies back home.
Back home?
Yeah, back home in the UK. England. Yeah, North England is where I'm from. Was power station on the doorstep. So.
Cool. Not an English accent. Sorry, not an Aussie accent.
I can tell. I think I've shed the English accent now, haven't I, mate?
A little bit longer, maybe a little longer. So, how did you first get into NDT though?
Yeah, and it's a bit of a funny story where I'd had a few jobs back home where I'd sort of messed around in offices and workshops, and before I sort of finally got my foot in what I thought I wanted to do, which was working on the railway. And it's a good job and I really enjoyed it, and the guys there were fantastic, and but we used to do quite a lot of heavy lifting and manual work, and at the end of the night, because it was all night shift, I'd see this guy get out of the van and he'd come out and he'd, with a can of white paint, spray the weld on the rail, and he'd put a permanent yoke on it, and I'd be like, this guy's getting paid 10 hours for doing this, and I'm pretty sure I can do that, so yeah, but I never really thought much about it after that. And then, as sort of luck would have it, I bumped into a mate around town actually, and they said, there's some jobs going where I work, and it's doing this, and he's explaining what I'd seen these guys doing on the railway. Mm-hmm. So I said, put my name down and see what happens. Yeah. And at that point I was sort of going 50-50. It was either going to be a full rail career or something completely different. And what I'd said to myself at the time was, I got these 2 job applications in, and whoever called me first, the decision was made, that's who I'm going with. Yeah. National Power called me up, and the railways went to one side, and I went for the interview with National Power and had a really good interview. And like I said, the rest is history. Yeah,
and so then they gave you some more training in NDT.
NDT was such a massive part of what we did back there. They owned a heap of power assets. It was in their best interest to keep them running online. Yep. So we'd go in as kind of what they called us was inspection management. So they trained not just technicians, but they trained supervisors, NDT supervisors, what you would call them over here, if you will. And so we were all very highly trained. But what they did for us was they'd got this 3-year apprenticeship structure, mm-hmm. and you did, say, your surface methods in year 1, you did subsurface methods in year 2, and then in year 3 you were sort of branching out and specialising, but it was continuous learning, and it was, you were forever doing like assignments. How does a power station work? How does this work? So, yeah, real good structured training, and set me up for sure for the future. Yeah.
Did you know it'd lead to level 3?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. Back then,
Just
no.
Back then.
No, when I started working in that job, I'd gone with, this is not a diss on the people I worked with on the railway, but I moved from that environment to this environment of NDT, and say what you like about NDT people, but there was a definite shift in like skill level. Right. We're shoveling and barring rail. Right. Yeah. Now we're doing all this technical, and I felt out of place. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was like a fish out of water, I guess you could say. Yeah. And I was like, wow, I'm going to get found out here, and people are going to really see how stupid I am. Yeah. But I guess. And
they did find that for a few years.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, they work everything gets worked out.
Of course, yeah. And you can't hide it forever.
What was the point then that you felt a little bit more comfortable in this power station world?
So I guess after a couple of years and doing a few of the PCNs, because there were PCN exams over there, same as over here pretty much, but just a different cert scheme. I did a couple of those, got working with the guys, got to know them really well, good bunch of people, and just sort of found like my stride with it. But I remember in ultrasonics in particular, like that first day in the classroom, sat down, I put the probe on the plate, and I was like, whoa, what the hell's going on here?
It's magic.
Like, I had absolutely no idea.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely no idea. Yeah. And to this day, people might say.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be a few people.
I'm
who
sure.
Still got no idea. Yeah.
About me.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, when the 3-year training scheme had finished, and I'm now all of a sudden supervising people that have been doing NDT for years.
Yeah.
I had to learn fast, but that was the training scheme, and that's what National Power did. And I just found that the skill level went up, but helped by the company. Very, very focused on training.
Yeah.
Some might say they trained the best.
Yeah.
Not just in NDT, but all fields of engineering and power station sort of work.
Yeah.
A lot of skilled guys there. A lot of skilled guys.
And so that's over in the UK.
That's right.
All right. And when you came here to Australia, my understanding from here in Australia, a lot of companies want to train people. A lot of guys want to be trained, but it's so easy to just change a shirt and work for someone else.
Correct.
Here. So it's like the employers, they kind of back off a little bit. They don't really want to spend the money and get everyone trained. And the guy who wants the work, he just tries to figure out who's going to pay him the most anyway.
Yeah,
so they move on. So it's a little different here, isn't it?
They'll jump ship for 50 cents an hour, and I think part of that is probably something we've talked about before, where NDT isn't seen as a career, it's seen more as just a job.
Yeah.
Some people see it like that, some don't. And I think you've got engineers and people like that have gone to university, and they probably have this preconceived notion of what an NDT technician is. And in some cases that might be right, but it's not right in all cases, like any job, And one of the things that we did back home, and my old boss was instrumental in getting it all set up through the government, was the NDT degree. And it was put in place with Northampton University and the British Institute of Non-Destructive Testing, BINDT. They put all this framework together, and it was like maybe a 3 to 5 year university degree, and we were the sort of guinea pigs for that.
Right.
And we actually, me and a mate of mine, we were the first on the course, and we completed that degree. And I wouldn't say it's worthless over here, and having it has probably benefited me because it looks good on paper, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's not something that people go around shouting about. Not only am I an NDT, I've got to. No, you don't do it.
Yeah.
You don't do it. So people don't know, and they still see NDT as just a job rather than a career. And there's a few of us, me for one, wholly see it as a career. I've been doing it 20 years.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. It's interesting because I'm sure you could definitely talk to a number of people in the NDT industry here in Australia, and how they got into it is a really unusual experience, and then they just stepped it, but then they never left, right? And it's like, okay, once they got into it, they just got deeper and deeper and deeper into that, and they just found a branch, and they got into aviation, or got into something more specific, but they never left that engineering part of the world from NDT. But if it's more of I suppose for a job, where do you think people are just getting their skills now and then just leaving? Where are they going to then?
There's definitely a subset of NDT technicians that are ticket collectors.
Right.
But then there's a lot of them that I, for one, have always been the person that when I'm testing something, I want to know what it is, because then I can work out maybe some things about what I'm looking at and what I need to find, and it also benefits your own education. So, but you do definitely get a lot of technicians that they just want to come to work, earn a crust, put a magnet on a piece of steel, find some defects or not, write a report and go home, and that's fine, that's fair enough. We had those kind of people back home. We employed them just as service method techs, and they loved it.
That's fine.
They loved it. Yeah. But then you got the other guys who you could see they wanted a bit more, and you got to treat them all equally though, because everyone's required.
Yeah.
The advanced UT guy is as important as the mag guy. They might not see it themselves because of how they perceive their job as a job or a career.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely need both types of people, and some take it more serious than others. But I guess you get that in all walks of life, in every job.
But you're now a trainer. in a particular team looking after the national group or just the state group?
I look after 2 states,
Right.
in terms of the NDT, and I sort of fell into a training role probably because I got level 3s.
Right.
But you don't need level 3s to train. You only need the level 2 according to the standards. You only need the level 2 to teach.
Right.
So as long as you've got the level 2, you can teach, right? But you know, I never felt comfortable. I remember the first time I delivered a course. It's like, right, let's find out how much you don't know. Because it's like you got questions coming and you've got to think on your feet. And I don't think anyone can know everything. But it's like anything where you do things a few times and you sort of get used to it. One of the reasons I really wanted to teach was because I was no good at talking to people in crowds.
Right.
I deliver a toolbox talk on a morning to 20, 30 guys, and you know, my hands would be shaking.
Yeah.
Even to this day, it's a little bit like that. And a conversation with people, I was nervous then. And like, really, I couldn't tell. Yeah, I just must hide it well.
Yeah.
But for sure, never liked talking in front of crowds. So it was like, do you want to teach? Yeah, all right. So I did mag first, and I'm reading the material and thinking, God, you know, I've got a level 3, but even I forgot some of this.
You forgot some of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Had to go back all again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still find myself, you know, say there's a mag course next week, I'll still go through the material just to, because I'm not a full-time tutor. It's something I do in my spare time as part of my job. It's not my full-time job.
Right.
You know, my job is reviewing procedures and all this kind of stuff with a bit of site work now and again. But teaching is something I've really got into and really started to enjoy, especially as I've developed my own style, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And so do you then find yourself going to site and picking on the experienced guys? You say, oh, that's not how we teach it in class now. It's like,
I'll have a joke, you know. Everyone knows me as a bit of a, what do you say in Australia? A larrikin. Is that the right word?
I don't know.
A bit of a joker. Yeah. So yeah, like, I'm not always.
That's weird. It's like, well, trying to find jokes. Yeah, I was like, no, I don't think we should find jokes.
I'm not always the 100% serious guy, but one thing I've always taken seriously is that you do a quality job.
Yeah.
You know, for me, that's always been paramount, and it goes back to a guy I used to work with. He was my old boss actually, and he once said to me, "Here, Howson, whatever you do, don't lose your integrity." That stayed with me for 20 years, you know, and we all get onto a job and we're tired and whatnot, but you just got to maintain focus and make sure, you know, at the end of the day, your name's on a report or whatever. So
Yeah.
you got to remember that. And, you know, on a more serious note, not wanting to take an absolute serious, if something happens, like your name's on that.
It can be catastrophic.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, doesn't happen often. It's not to say it doesn't happen, but yeah, that's how serious
The potential's
NDT
there.
can be. Yeah, for sure. And I think some of these guys that are jobbing need to remember that you know, they go to work, they sign these records of tests, sometimes not really understanding what it might mean for them later down the line if something happened. But yeah, it can be a bit of a serious game, NDT.
Yeah.
There's a level of professionalism that you need to maintain, and that's whether you're level 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, obviously the levels of professionalism go up the higher you are, and you know, maintaining things like confidential things you learn as you go. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And did someone see it in you to say, okay, you should be a mentor or a teacher, or did you kind of wanted to make sure that everyone you're working with is also doing the best job they can as well? And so you wanted to teach?
Yeah, I think somebody probably saw something in me that they said, you know, you might be all right at this, why don't you have a go? I think maybe that happened, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Probably did.
Yeah.
But then also, I really like telling people how things are and how things work. And another thing that happened to me once upon a time was when I was doing my own training my own personal development. You know, I might have been going for another certificate, and I remember we were down in our facility, our training centre, as you might call it, back home in the UK, and the guy that was looking after us, he would just say, yeah, you failed this one. No explanation. And that kind of stuck with me as well, as, you know, maybe this is not how you want to be, because at the end of the day, this person didn't come off good, in my opinion.
Right.
If he's just saying, yeah, you failed that one, and no constructive feedback, but at the same time kind of mocking you. And while I'll have a laugh and a joke with people and mock people, it's never my intention to never my intention to upset anyone, although that might happen from time to time. But yeah, for me, imparting knowledge to bring up the next lot is always at the top, and I don't mind telling people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not one of these people. That person was obviously a person that didn't want to give away his secrets because perhaps he felt his job was threatened, maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You never know how people are thinking, but that was my perception of it 20 years ago when I was a young guy.
Probably 20 years ago, you didn't have that much of a distraction. Now, these days, no doubt, the kids with the technology that's available and their attention span, things like that. What are the kids going through these days on their ability to learn?
It's hard for them.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard for them without a doubt. You know, I wonder what I'd have been like having been born into this.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I was a bit of a reprobate when I was younger anyway, to be honest. You know, I was never a model student, or, you know, if you could probably go back and ask my teachers how I'd turn out, it probably wouldn't be good.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, me either.
You know,
right.
I had a fairly rough upbringing, and school wasn't great, but I think one thing at school was I did seem to have a lot of mates in different groups, so what do they call it, a social chameleon or something.
Right, okay.
So I think I've always been that kind of person.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if people looked at what I'd come from to where I am now, they'd be like, geez.
He's done well.
Done all right.
He's done all right.
I think so.
Yeah, a lot of, on like my report cards and stuff at school, pretty much the most consistent comment from the teachers is, if John could have put his mind to it, he would be able to do really well.
Well, look at you now. Look at you now.
And so, like, well, it's like anything. If you really want it, you really want to get through it, you will apply yourself differently. But the challenges for young people, the way I see it, is they're not quite, brains are fried, but they've got access to so many conveniences to distract them.
Information overload is part of it.
Yeah.
And with that information overload, it's just too easy to get distracted, and the access to it it's seamless. You know, you make something easy for someone to do, they just do it. You know, we're all trying to do that. We're all looking at ways of making things easier, and the way to make things easier is to give them something that, you know, it just happens. We all like logging into something. So what do? You create Face ID.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But how do you translate that?
It's hard.
Like easy, give them something to do, make it customizable, make it entertaining, I guess, but then apply it to a yoke or an ultrasonic method, you know, trying to them to look at scans and images and
it's hard
signals
to get,
and stuff. Like,
it's hard to get somebody to review phased array data or something when Instagram's right here ready for scrolling.
Right.
It's a bit of a different mindset, and I really don't know what you could do about people that are in that position, because I think you're either that person or you're not. Now, I personally have taken a massive step back from social media just because I could see the drain it was having on me personally in other areas of life. And I'm a very person out inside work and outside of work. And the last thing I need to be doing is getting lost down a YouTube hole. So I've made every effort to keep things to the side. But, you know, particularly at work, you go to site for 10 hours a day. Yeah, during breaks and whatnot, fine, but I could never find myself scrolling through whatever social media platform is the latest thing. while I'm trying to do Cobra scanning on small ball. It's just the things don't go together.
Yeah, they wouldn't go together. But I suppose, can you spot that in the classroom?
For sure.
Where the kids are, how
It's bad.
connected to the internet they are, as opposed to someone who actually wants to be there.
Yeah, because on day one you say, right, phone's down, don't touch them again for the rest of the week, and they're all itching. You know,
they've all got their tick.
Yeah. Especially the younger ones. Even some of the older ones, though. You know, it seems to be contagious.
Yeah.
But like, it's really obvious sometimes that people aren't applying themselves in class because they've got that distraction. We experienced at one point in time, I can't attribute it all to this, but seemed to go hand in hand with people using the phones, and the pass rate wasn't as good. So we really made a conscious effort to say, listen guys, this is actually your time. You know, you're paying a lot of money for this, or your employers are. Why don't you just put your phones down? It's 40 hours of your time out of the week, you know, depending on what course you're doing. You've got the rest of your life to do that. You know, like, just put your phone, just apply yourself to this. It's 1 week.
You'd probably see a difference between the guys who spent their own money as opposed to the guys who had the company pay.
That's right, 100%. The guys that pay themselves are generally more focused, generally better if they're interstate. Doesn't happen often for us getting interstate people, but certainly they come with the overalls on of the company I work for, and they pretty much. I better be careful what I say here. It's not. They kind of think it's a free ride almost for them, and they might go home and they might not do their own work because they've got kids or they've got the mates to go and see. Whereas the people that come into state, they haven't got that here. So they come, and then when they go back to the hotel room at night, there's nothing else better to do other than read the book. And there's a definite difference between locals and interstaters, and also employees of the company and people that are external. You see that the people from interstate and externals, or both, generally do better than the internals, particularly if they're local. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose, and that just gives more evidence for the employers to say, well, don't pay for the thing, get the individual to pay for it, fund their own way, because then their effort and their motivation is on the line, I guess.
I think there's a couple of things you could do, but it depends how far a business wants to go with it. You know, you pay for the initial course, and maybe if something happens and they don't pass, maybe they pay for the resit themselves. You know,
there's plenty of things in a contract you could put in place, definitely, and even if they wanted to leave early, right, recover costs and whatever. What's some of the things that you've found yourself adapt and change as you've gone through, you know, from feeling like an intruder, I guess, when you first started training to now? What are some of the good things that you've said, well, the different ways you've adapted to training to get more out of the class or more for the students?
I've always tried being quite interactive. The hardest thing is keeping people engaged. One thing for sure is keeping the phones out of their hands. If they've got to take calls, you know, that's fair enough. Or, you know, bathroom breaks. I'm not the demon headmaster, but at the same time, you know, they've got to learn the theory, and if they're out for a complete section, that's quite a heavy loss. So keeping them entertained is one thing. Keeping it relatively light-hearted. There's some pretty heavy sections in theory, even with mag. But at least mag's kind of intuitive. PT's not as intuitive as mag, because it seems you've just got to remember some things, and there's no sort of logic to it. UT, I really like teaching, whether that's thickness testing or welds. They've got logical things that happen in those courses, and one thing that when I first started delivering, like I think I said this earlier, I was a bit of a fish out of water with it. Definitely a bit of imposter syndrome. I didn't think I could teach it, but that's part of the reason I threw myself in there, to see if I could do it, sink or swim. And the first class I delivered probably wasn't that great, but I had an all right pass rate, so that's something.
That's a win.
Yeah, and I was probably a bit, awkward and a bit clunky with it. Whereas now I'm open, I'm chatting and walking around the class, and I'm doing things on whiteboards, and I've got explanations for a lot of good things now, and just things I've just developed over time that have, maybe I can teach it like this now, and this seems to work with this kind of people, because it also depends on the type of person you get. If you get an engineer, they ask different questions to your bog standard technician, let's say,
right,
or somebody from outside. They all ask different questions. I wouldn't say it's quite as black and white as the engineers' questions are more difficult, but what the engineers tend to do is they think about it more in a more technical sense. It's like, right, when we're teaching about propagation of waves, they're asking real deep questions because they've probably done some of that stuff at uni already.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas the person off the street or someone we're training up from scratch, maybe they've got a passing interest in sinusoidal waves.
Yeah.
But only
passing interest in that category.
You ask them what the frequency of the power is coming off the wall, and hardly any of them know it's 50 hertz. But that's what we operate our magnets at, and all that means is it's going 50 times a second, backwards and forwards. So you explain these concepts to them, and you can see lights going off on their heads around the room, and some like that and ask more questions about it. But I guess at the end of the day, I'm never prepared for the questions they get asked. There's always another question.
Yeah.
There's always a different question.
Yeah, right.
And I think the key there is, if you don't know it, just hold your hands up and say, I don't know this one, but I will find out for you.
Yeah.
I've heard other stories of, they come to me and they say, I did this course once, and the teacher said, it's just like that because Mr. Kramer said so.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a cop out. Probably a bit of a lack of understanding on a trainer's part, maybe. But for me, I'm that person who, like I said earlier, if I'm testing something, I want to know what it's doing. So if somebody asks me a question and it's about something in particular, I don't know the answer, I'll go and read the book.
Yeah. And I suppose, what was I going to ask? Do you think kids these days are asking a lot of questions, or are they just in the classes, they just want to get to the end, they want to get that ticket, they want to go to the field, and they want to get working?
I think a lot of them are surprised, especially in day one and day two. Like, you bombard them with this theory that's pretty alien to them, and they're like, shit, what have I done here?
Yeah.
Like, and the learning curve is like, it's steep.
Yeah.
And they come to the class sometimes, particularly as well with UT1 to UT2, because they think they've done UT1, and then you come back and you say, right, what's the near zone calculation? And they're all like, forgot this just after I left the UT1 class.
Never thought about it again.
Yeah. So there's that always happens, and that's just a case of getting it back into their heads. But again, you've just got to find a way to relate the material to them and keep them engaged.
Yeah.
Which is not always an easy task.
I was in a classroom one time, and there was a guy who was a little bit older than me, sent there from a rail company, and doing UT1, and it was such a big learning curve for him. And I think it was day 3, he'd had enough. Didn't really want to be at the class. He made sure everyone knew about it. It was towards the afternoon, and then they were talking about the exams that are coming up soon, and these are things you need to start putting in place. And you can see how much stress was on this guy.
Yeah.
And he was contemplating how much longer he was actually going to be working at the company, and whether it would be useful to stay there. Just a second. Hi, how are you? Yeah, cool. Just chuck it down there. Did they come through the front door, did they?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Cool, thank you. Brilliant, Christmas time, thank you. Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too. Yes. And so yeah, he was ready to throw his hands up.
Yeah.
He didn't have a go at the trainer, but pretty much the trainer was like, no, you have to stay. It's going to be easy. Anyway, that was the end of the day. It was the 4th day that everyone in the class felt his stress, and then in that same day, everything started falling into place. and it made all the sense in the world. It was like such a build up, and then it finally got into place, and then we were preparing for the final day exam the next day. And it was like, man, if that guy just stayed here, they just that little bit longer.
Oh, he didn't stay.
No, he didn't stay. He didn't come back, and then didn't come back for the exam. It was like, oh my goodness, he was so close.
Yeah, I approached that one up front. That's common, in my experience. I mean, I've never had anybody get up so stressed that they've walked out, but maybe that is partly to do with the upfront and prefacing that course. You know, this is difficult, and for the first 2 days, you're going to be like mind blown. But just give it a chance. Get to Wednesday, maybe Thursday. You'll start to feel much better about it.
Yeah.
And I have that conversation with them every time.
Yeah.
Because I know it's a difficult, you know, like I said, the curve is like this at the start, and it seems probably insurmountable for a lot of people.
It was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he was a little older, right? I think he was trying to figure out his life decisions, like whether he wanted to continue this in the last few years of his going into retirement, I guess. But do you see many older guys in the classes now?
Not so many. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 70-30.
Okay.
To the
So
young to old.
Yep.
Yeah.
Old. What's old? Older than you?
Oh no, you know, I'm no spring chicken anymore, mate. Like I'm well, am I 40 or 41? I'm not sure. Like I'm old anyway. But I guess when I say old, I mean about my age.
Yeah.
And older.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's 70-30.
Everyone's younger than me these days.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So yeah.
It gives you some hope.
It does.
Young guys coming in.
Yeah, it does, and that's what we want. And we've got a real drive on getting. You know, I'm sort of heavily involved with the ANDT and a bunch of other bits and pieces. And for us, it's like getting the young folk in now and getting them to, you know, getting them excited about NDT, which is not always that glamorous. Like, you spend a bit of time...
Just dangle a magnet in front of them.
crawling around in crap for a few days. You soon get fed up, but yeah, you just got to get... Here's a good job. I've done it for a long time, and it's done me well. And I know a bunch of other people that think the same way as I do.
Yeah. It's definitely something that'll be there for a long, long time to come.
It's going to be needed forever, for sure.
I suppose, but you're against someone who can, you know, get on YouTube, get on TikTok, and make a side hustle or some income from reviewing, you know, computer games and stuff like that.
Side hustles are fine, but you've got to be interesting. You know, and everyone thinks they're interesting these days, but they're not.
They do, yeah.
And that's the plain and simple of it. Everyone thinks they can start a YouTube. Everyone thinks they can be Paul Holloway. You know.
Oh, Joe, everyone would love to be Paul Holloway.
Yeah, exactly.
He does a great job.
But the fact of the matter is, not everyone is Paul Holloway.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of people that have tried to be Paul Holloway and failed. Yeah. Because it's difficult.
Yeah.
Like anything, including NDT, you've got to put your mind to it. Yeah. You've got to apply yourself. Maybe one day you will be Paul Holloway, but not for those first 100 videos. Yeah,
well, it's kind of like that imposter syndrome too, right? You've got this, you'd like to get into it, you don't feel quite competent, and then you might get, you know, feel a bit more competent and a bit more, but you've got to stick it out over the long term.
That's right, you've got to
really,
stick
really
it out.
Good at it.
Yeah, that's for sure. You've got to stick it out, mate, and you know, who knows what might happen.
Yeah, cool. Interesting. Cool.
Well, thanks for having me, John.
Thank you. No worries. Cool.
Thanks a lot.
See you around. See you around.
See you later.
Red light. Red light.
Green light.
Excellent.
You seen Squid Game?
Red light, green light. I think you should do that at the ANTT exam.
Yeah. That'd go down well. Yeah.